I'm not well versed in the exact reasons why the US sees Qatar as an ally. Maybe it's just that Qatar contains the US bases, but I don't see that they play any positive role in American interests in terms of negotiating with terrorists or mediating or anything like that. So I don't think a change of the exact list of current active terrorist groups will have any effect for them. I was hate watching Jon Stewart today, and I saw his interview with Jason Rezaian, who spent 544 days in an Islamic Republic prison. So naturally, seeing as I found him on left-wing media, I assumed that he would be anti-Shah, and indeed, he completely minimized the role of the Shah in the revolution, despite admitting that people on the street were calling for the Shah after the host brought it up himself. I also saw in different interviews that he's anti-Israel, and one time
We
when
hate
asked
him.
about, okay,
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
When,
A lot of Iranians hate, like even before all of this, Iranians hated him. They consider him to be part of the problem. But yeah, go on.
the other thing I saw about him was that when asked about why the Islamic Republic hates America so much, he said it was because, and I'm using his words, it was because of the 1953 coup by the CIA, which in actuality was not a coup. The Shah used his constitutional powers to dismiss a prime minister that was trying to give himself total dictatorial powers. So Iran went from being a constitutional monarchy to being a constitutional monarchy in an event that was the exact opposite of a coup. So about this, I have the following questions. First, is it safe to conclude that he's a reformist based on just the evidence I outlined, and based on the fact that he got released from prison at all? Second, a reformist listed on Mosdaryab. And third, is Mosdaryab down right now because I can't open it?
Yeah, so yes to the first one, and to the third one, yes, Dub is being attacked, and that's why it's not being coming. It's not showing up. And what was your second question?
Do you generally list reformists or only people who are actively like in the regime?
Anybody who is not asking for the fall of the Islamic Republic and is asking for negotiations and thinks there's a way to do a policy of appeasement with the Islamic Republic, we consider them to be reformers, and we consider them to be the enemy because they are actually the most dangerous people, because better than the regime itself, they're finding ways for the regime to survive. So these people have blood on their hand, in our opinion. And this is why this person has a history among Iranians, and they consider him to be on the wrong side. And we also, and here's the thing: the way that the Islamic Republic creates people that are useful for it, sometimes it doesn't even need to turn them into mercenaries, right? Right. So sometimes an understanding without an actual communication. So, for example, let's say that I am somebody who thinks that United States shouldn't be attacking the Islamic Republic. Okay, I have been acting like the opposition to the Islamic Republic. I have some problems with the Islamic Republic, but everywhere I get invited, I say like, "Oh, I'm against the sanctions. I'm against military intervention. I'm against Pahlavi. I'm against Israel." So the Islamic Republic, oh, like this is the type of a position that we like, right? So let's boost his resume, let's arrest him, let's make sure we don't mistreat him, let's try to provide ways that he could, like, you don't even need to talk to him. You just understand, like, this guy's having the correct positions. And then you also realize that, oh, the Islamic Republic is treating me not, the Islamic Republic is not really mistreating me. They're opening doors for me, so there is like an understanding between you without necessarily you talk like them coming like, hey, here's some money, go do this for us. Do you know what I mean? You just notice what's happening. You both understand what's happening. I think Jeffrey wanted to add something to that, right? Jeffrey, go ahead.
You knocked that right out of the park. So, one of
Yeah.
the operational impacts of global socioeconomic and technological trends regarding the advanced transportation technology, telecommunications technology, is it allows adversaries or any actor for that matter to do horizon scanning, right, and see what other actors that they find themselves co-aligned with. And so, from an organizational and structural perspective, your opposition is no longer defined. This goes from like, extra state security concerns, so ruler regime versus non-state actor like this douchebag, or say even just terrorist organizations in general. Traditionally, those structures were very hub and spoke and or spider web in nature, meaning they have a defined core, you have all these subsidiary nodes with defined organization operational ties between them. So you got guys like listening to their phones and all this other stuff. Well, now what you have is essentially competing clouds, right? So while those traditional structures exist, hub and spoke, spider web, like Armin said, some guy comes up and goes, here's a big bag of money with the cartoon dollar sign on it, do blah, blah, blah. You can actually, and if you want an example of that regarding the Chinese Communist Party, go to the FBI's website and look up Game of Pawns. It's also now that diaspora is far more complex and diffuse. So when an actor engages in activity, that's now spread throughout the world, the speed of light via the internet and cable news and the rest of it. And so they just, when that signal of that act hits a receptive node, that node then self incentivizes and does whatever it wants to do. And that's exactly what mullah regimes will do. I mean, it would be the 21st century modernized version of what Quincy Wright, who was a geopolitical theorist right after the Second World War, said that external meddlers can always be counted on to support internal political dissidents. In this case, the mullah regime trying to find anybody who is in opposition to U.S. intervention to kill those ruthless bastards.
I also wanted to suggest the idea, if you want to respond to the current point of maybe we can have another signal for that, like double raising hands, as opposed to making faces or I don't know what. But I don't know if that could get out of hand.
Double raising hands is also, I understand. Yeah, that's a good idea. If you want to respond, you could do a double raise hand.
I would maybe advise against that from a mod standpoint because there are a lot of other reactions that also happen. If people could just type in the chat that they want
Type in
to
the chat.
yeah, if
Okay.
and then we'll kind of see how that goes because I can see that also getting out of hand, allowing multiple people to chime in all the time. We might not keep our time, but we'll see.
Mm.
Okay, Danny, were you finished with your points?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. So next we have Francesco.
It's about the discussion we had about Al-Julani. And yeah, words are cheap. I think that's true. And actions speak louder than words in general. So he never condemned the attack on Druze publicly. And he could have easily done so, but he say, okay, maybe the Druze, but he didn't do the same for the Alawites, the Kurds. So yeah, he doesn't seem like to be against it. And yeah, also he never spoke against, I don't know, the freezing, like the ISIS members now that got let out of prison, about 15,000 of them. And yeah, there are a lot of people that are, out of hand under his control. I mean, 2 American soldiers got killed with an interpreter, right? And yeah, I think there is a clear pattern with him and everybody sees it. It's kind of obvious. So that's what I wanted to say. Plus, what is his legitimacy? Because who voted for him? Who does he represent? So is he legitimate ruler of Syria? That's some thoughts.
I think that's irrelevant when it comes to legitimacy. Right now, we're talking about who has the power. Like legitimacy comes from if he's able to hold power, then he is. If he's not able to hold power, then he's not. Legitimacy. Syria is in a failed state situation. Legitimacy comes from whoever has the highest power. It doesn't come from like democracy or elections right now. Like
It doesn't represent the
right now,
majority.
it
You
doesn't
cannot
matter.
claim
It
that.
doesn't
Yeah, you
matter
can blow
right
him
now.
off. That's it.
Oh,
What's
okay.
the
The point whether he represents people or not only matters if it translates into political power or not. So it does matter that he doesn't represent people, but only to the extent it affects his power over ruling over Syria. And I think that he has a lot more challenges against him being able to control Syria than whether or not he represents people. The fact that his own army is against some of the positions he's taking is a bigger threat to his ability to rule than whether or not he has democratic legitimacy.
So for you, you say it's irrelevant if somebody is the representation of the people or not.
No, I'm not saying it's irrelevant. I'm saying he has bigger problems than that right now. Much bigger problems than that. I'm saying that his control over Syria is very, very fragile for many, many reasons, but mostly because, okay, here's the thing. He doesn't represent his own army. Forget about Syria as a whole. He doesn't even represent the views of the people that are supposed to be fighting for him. That's a more immediate problem.
Yeah, I agree.
My final question was Trump, although he has given many reasons, as he calls many people who come from the southern border, a plethora of non law abiding names. When I look at the more information I've gotten in regard to the IRGC and terrorist proxies operating in South America, how much of that has contributed to his border tightening? Or was it kind of just a happy coincidence that he did that and then Maduro and now the IRGC? Am I making a connection where there might not be one and giving him a little too much credit? What do you think?
So you're saying how much of Trump's border policy has to do with IRGC's influence in Latin America? Is that the question?
Yes, because although he has plenty of reason that he has expressed plenty of reason to have controlled the border, we know that drugs and drug trafficking through terrorist organizations is big. That in of itself would be a good enough reason. But we also know that people have come in through the southern border a number of months ago that we found out were working for Iran to do different things. And so
For the
they were
Islamic Republic.
slipping right in. And so, how much of that contributes? And what do you
I think, okay, so his border policy, I think, had more to do with how popular that was to get elected. I think it was more related to that. That was something that was very, very, very much in demand by Americans. So I think that had more to do with that than the IRGC's involvement in Latin America. However, I do think that his whole Don Roe doctrine, you know, plan, the framework that he has to have more control over the Western Hemisphere, that has something to do with foreign influence in the Western Hemisphere, but not just IRGC. It's a combination of IRGC, Russia, and China, right? So, and I think the Islamic Republic is part of that. The fact that it's not just the Islamic Republic. Like the South America has become a major hub for all of the enemies of United States to come and camp around there and make that place base of their operations. So the Islamic Republic is doing in Latin America the same thing that China and Russia are doing, and basically Trump is like, yeah, we have to put an end to all of that, not just IRGC, right? And I honestly I think that their main concern is China more than even, and I think that Trump's positioning against the IRGC has more to do with isolating China. I think it's less to do with the Islamic Republic itself and more in preparation for what's about to come between United States and China, and making sure that the Islamic Republic and all of its areas of influence are either on the right side or at least not a place for China to be able to put pressure on United States.
even enough time for something like that? I guess at least to get the ball started rolling, but also considering that we're very bipartisan in this country and a good portion of what everybody wants to get done is undoing what someone else did. So, is it realistic that he's going to get very far in the next 3 years with anything with China?
I think a lot of these new policies, a lot of them are less partisan than some people think. I think a lot of the we'll have to see. We'll have to see because I think like there's weirdly there were some policies by the first term of Trump that continued by Biden, because I think some of these are above Trump and Biden. Like not like there's a deep state that the decisions are being made. They're just so apparent as the correct position to make that there's basically at some point even, I mean, for example, Trump came into office being an isolationist, and now look at him now, right? So I think there's certain things that are supposed to be so that makes so much sense for America that eventually the right forces and the right lobbies and the right sources of influence would basically make it so that even though, you know, it's not going to be exactly how it should be, but it puts you one way or another in the right path. Also, by the way, with regards to the 3 year remaining, just remember what Trump has done in the 1 year, right? So in the past 1 year, we have had more changes by a U.S. president that, like, I think it would take 10 Biden administrations to be able to do all of
That's a
these things that we
very
just
good
did.
point.
Right?
Right, right.
But in the past 1 year, another thing to keep in mind is that I think like some people within the Trump administration are thinking the same thing that you're thinking, BT. And I think that's might be, and this is just guessing, partly why they're making the board of peace, or is that the name? I think they're trying to create like an institution that is beyond, that Trump could continue some of the things that he's doing beyond this. I don't think that's going to work because it doesn't have as much of whatever, it's not going to be as influential as the office of the president. But I think they are trying to find ways for Trump to continue to do some things on a global level even after his presidency is over. So that's the reason why they created the board of peace, and they're making Trump the leader of it forever, apparently, for as long as he's alive. So that might be in reaction to that. But Jeffrey, what do you think?
So I posted it in the discussion, the report I wrote and sent up the chain that in part underwrote the calculus surrounding U.S. policy regarding Venezuela. And it outlines in no uncertain detail the organization operational ties between the violent Marxist Maduro regime as it existed, Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state, Chinese Communist Party, the Mullah regime, and specifically Hezbollah. And Hezbollah has been expanding its influence throughout Central and South America for the better part of 20 years. And it got to a point now where, given where everything else is going on in the world, I just posted another report that'll help give people a framework to think about things, at least hopefully. We can no longer afford to just let that slide. So that's why Donald acted out. As far as like the resistance that's coming, like the maintaining national will, or the impact that increasing polarity is having on maintaining national will, that's one of the reasons why I rail against all the internal political dissidents and seditionists, both on this show, in the reports that I write and share, regardless of which side of the aisle that, whether they're radical leftist and woke mamalukes, or crazy people like Tucker Carlson or Ron Paul or Paleo Cons. It doesn't matter who it is. There are certain policies that, given the state, that given the increasing contentious nature that defines the contemporary geopolitical and geostrategic environment we're in, the United States has to adopt very specific and decisive policies to either offset escalation, which is probably going to happen no matter what now, and barring that, minimize the damage and prepare us to the best that we can regarding what's coming. Part and parcel of that is removing the Maduro regime, and as a follow-up to that, which is in that report if you read it, is also taking down, or is taking down the Mullah regime and supporting brave Iranian protesters, because they're one of the Mullah regime is one of the pieces that's got to be taken off the board.
So do you think this is so essential that it goes above the presidency of Trump? Like, it's so important for United States that it like, even if Trump was not president, this is the policy that maybe later, maybe not this fast, but at some point would have been adopted by other presidents as well, even if Trump was not the president. No.
No, I just
Mm.
point to what happened. Armin, think about what happened. Obama threw those brave kids under the bus. Biden and was involved in creating the JCPOA Iran deal that were then the
Yeah, yeah.
Biden retreads that were part of, or the Obama retreads were part of Biden's administration that very much screwed up Biden's foreign policy, right?
I understand that. I think that Democrats are just would have. I think that I think the Democrats would just make it so much later and would have made it so much costly. But I think that this is, you don't think that they would ever wisen
So
up to it. No.
you're basing your assessment on a traditional framework of the Democrat Party that existed, say, during the time of
Could,
JFK.
No,
could I
no, no.
respond,
I'm
Armin, to
basing.
this?
No, I'm more. I'm not even think. I'm not judging the Democrats. But we go to Oscar as well. I'm more thinking in line of political determinism. You know what I mean? More than based on j- political, based on economic and military reality, objective realities, that certain things are you don't believe in that theory that certain things are, inevitable. Jeffrey, can you answer that? Yeah, and then we go to
Yeah,
Oscar.
so I'm like I mentioned this in the last show that it's true that monadic regime type and economic interdependence does raise the barometer for interstate security concern to translate in interstate warfare. That also applies to collaboration. It doesn't do so decisively. I'm saying independent of that, at least from my experience of the people and the players that are involved, some of which are the main players, they don't give a shit. Like people who are
Yeah.
part of Obama's administration don't
No,
give a
I
shit.
understand. No, I'm not disputing that. I completely agree with
Mm.
that. But I'm just saying that maybe like there's this understanding that the material realities on the ground will make certain outcomes one way or another. So maybe if the Democrats would never do this, it would force for a Republican to be elected because this has to happen. But do you believe so you don't believe in that sort of determinism of outcome when it
No, I'm
comes to
saying
like
that
if
those people, like, are you saying that these people, because they look at the ground, what's the reality on the
no
ground, it illustrates that their survival is directly dependent upon us doing these policies, and that's going to like
no I
offset.
don't I'm not saying that I'm not
I
saying
don't
that they would
understand.
wisen up. I'm just saying whoever doesn't wisen up will be removed one way or another.
I mean, it's still pro that. That said, it's the fight that BT was mentioning. That fight is real, which is why I post some of the things in the discussion board to pre-bunk a lot of lines of derision. That's why I do that.
Okay. Oscar, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, well, I wanted to talk a little bit about Trump, which is why some people like him and people like me don't, which is that he's a person that people say gets things done, right? But he's a person that, because he gets things done, at the same time, he doesn't like mediators, right? He doesn't like people to mediate when he makes a decision, and he likes things to happen when he says it happens. And so he introduces a very big wild card into the world, right? Whether for good or for bad. And he also introduces a level of the use of speech based on his position that is completely irresponsible, right? It's something that you would see out of a cartoon, basically, an evil cartoon. And he's using this position, right, to make things, right? For example, training people in ICE, arming them, and then sending them out to the city to go and come in contact with civilians, right? What are you going to do once you end your presidency and you have to disarm them? What is that going to do, right? You've introduced a lot of changes, like you say, many changes you've introduced, I fear might not be able to be undone. And you have to really, it's we talk about Trump and Trump and Trump. It's like it's so personalistic that we're talking about the guy basically because we can't talk about almost anybody else. It really matters like on what foot he kind of like wakes up on, and if he thinks that you have been paying the rent, whether you've been paying back what you owe him, and if you don't, he's gonna bully you until you do, right? And I am afraid, what kind of America are we going to be left with after his presidency, and what kind of standing will America be, in relation to allies or in relation to other actors in the world, like Denmark, for example, who actually helped us in Iraq and in Afghanistan. So I'm just like, I just kind of wanted to present maybe another side because I actually see him as very problematic.
Oscar.
But
Also,
Hold on. No, hold on, Michael. There, mute your mic. You raise your hand if you want to respond to that. Okay. So I saw a bunch of people, BT, I saw a lot of people raise their hand. I wonder if they want to respond. Let me know. So I saw Jeffrey seems to want to respond to this. Adam, did you raise your hand to be added to the list or to respond to Oscar? Okay, respond. Okay. Amy, you raise your hand to be added to the list or respond to Oscar?
Respond to Oscar.
Okay. And Michael
Oh,
wants to
let
respond to
me
Oscar. All right. So let's just go. So BT, Jeffrey, Adam, Amy, and Michael, they want to respond to Oscar. Guys, keep it short then.
So it's true that President Trump has a certain hard way of speaking. The simple fact is sometimes that's what needs to be said. The time where the United States is going to allow our allies to free ride under our security umbrella, that's done. Not only is it immoral and it's in direct violation of the agreements they signed on to, we can no longer cover all bets because we now live in an asymmetric multipolar world. And while it's true that you're worried about unintended negative secondary consequences, say Donald unleashing a force that he can't control, we have to weigh relative risk. And right now, the previous administration let in tens of thousands of terrorists and known assets for our adversaries' intelligence agencies. All of them have been activated. And if we do not sit there and do our domestic shaping operations prior to the onset of escalatory war, we're going to have a whole shitload of mass casualty events. Indeed, and I'm going to finish up with this. We don't have enough people on the wall. We literally are hiring back people that retired and they're getting up in the field. So I'm not saying I don't hear your issue. I'm saying you have to weigh relative risk, and the risk is far greater in not doing.
Okay. Adam?
Hi,
Sorry,
guys.
BT, I took over. Yeah.
Hi,
So,
guys.
hi.
Nice to meet you all. I've been watching the Revolution live all month. I wanted to jump on this thing about Trump's language, which I guess we've all lived through and have an opinion about. And I wanted to mention one time I saw Trump actually explain himself really quickly, and I thought, oh, he rarely does that. And he explained just in line of one breath that the core to what he's doing is trying to be unpredictable. And I thought that's absolutely right, especially because, you know, we live in a mad world, mutually assured destruction with the nukes, and he's got his finger on the button, and he wants people to think he's crazier than he is. And honestly, I've started doing this myself as a politician. People in Toronto think I'm pretty freaking crazy, but they don't know what I'm going to do.
Oh, so
And
he's a genius. I just don't get him.
yeah, well, and
Okay,
actually, there's a
guys, Oscar,
ref.
not a single person interrupted you when you were speaking. Not a
Sorry,
single
sorry.
person.
It's
Sorry,
okay.
sorry.
I teach coding to kids. I can handle it. And I just wanted to mention a reference that I found really helpful for understanding this because I thought of it when Trump said that a couple of years ago. And it's a chapter in Steven Pinker's book, How the Mind Works, Strangelove. And some of you have probably seen it. And he uses Dr. Strangelove to explain why humans would evolve to have emotions that they can't control. And it's basically to follow through on threats, which is very relevant to what's happening right now because Trump's making threats and he has to follow through. And the idea is that if you think Trump, let's say it's Trump who's president, and you think he's sane, then you might think, well, if we launch a nuke at him, he's not going to send a nuke back because that's just going to kill more people. By the time you send a nuke at them, they're already dead. So if all they value is human life, then they won't nuke back. Therefore, you can nuke them. So Trump has to seem so crazy that he doesn't value human life, that he cares more about following through on threats because of nuclear mutually assured destruction.